Today's topic is dynamic resilience modeling and planning for interdependent critical infrastructure. And our speakers today are Dr. Quanyan Zhu and Dr. Ray Zimmerman, both from New York University. CIRI's mission objective is to improve the security and the resilience of the nation's critical infrastructure. And that obviously is a very significant challenge, and helping us achieve that, we are fortunate to have Dr. Zhu and Dr. Zimmerman as researchers, and they will present to you today their research in support of that objective. As we, I think, all understand, the infrastructure, our nation's infrastructure, is increasingly interconnected and interdependent, and that includes cyber, physical, and the human dimension. The research that will be presented today aims to strengthen the security and resilience of critical infrastructures by analyzing and modeling the relationships of different infrastructure components, which include those social dimensions, economic incentives, as well as the cyber-physical interconnections. And today's webinar will highlight the multi-layer network system of system approach that they're taking in developing decision support tools to allow stakeholders to coordinate their efforts in recovering in the recovery process for dynamic networks. Quickly, by way of introduction, Dr. Quanyan Zhu holds a bachelor's in engineering from McGill University, a master's of science from the University of Toronto, and a PhD right here from our own University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. His current research interests are on game theory, smart grid, network security and privacy, resilient critical infrastructures, and cyber physical systems and cyber deception. And Dr. Ray Zimmerman, the co-PI on this project, hails from New York as well. She has a bachelor's in chemistry from the University of California, Berkeley, and a master's in city planning from the University of Pennsylvania, and a PhD in planning from Columbia University in New York. With Dr. Zimmerman's recent focus of research combines social science, natural science, and engineering perspectives on the impacts of extreme events on the interconnected infrastructure networks and urban resilience. With no further ado, I'll turn the presentation over to Dr. Zhu and Dr. Zimmerman.
All right. Thanks, Randy, for the introduction. And also, it's great to meet everybody online electronically, even though we cannot see each other. So what we're going to do today is just try to give you an overview or introduction to something that we currently are doing, looking at how to do the planning and the modeling of interdependent critical infrastructures. So the motivation for us is that when we look at the power systems, transportation, communication, and also banking systems, they all lead to a structure of interdependencies that will probably a critical issue for our nation's economy when they're subject to either natural disaster or a man-made or human-induced attacks. So that's why we need to do a protection and prevention against these type of disruptions. But these protection and prevention mechanisms may not be always possible. That's why we need to ensure the resilience to safeguard against these type of risks. So what we want to do is to look at resilience of infrastructures and to make those infrastructures that can recover their performances in a short period of time, and also within acceptable cost after a disruptive event. So the question that we're going to ask ourselves in this research is how to make planning reduce the risk and improve the resilience of interdependent infrastructures, and also how to coordinate multiple infrastructures in the planning when there is a planning from the power side, and there are also people making the planning from the transportation side. And also, we ask ourselves in the modeling aspect, how can we integrate different components, the cyber, physical, and human components into the planning? So sometimes the human is a tricky part. Maybe we able to capture all the elements from cyber and the physical, but there's also human elements that actually could be modified or insights into the interdependent infrastructure. So, and lastly, what we want to do or aiming at is hopefully we can integrate all the components here and to develop a integrated decision support tool that allow us to automate the decision and the planning for the critical infrastructures. So I think what the research objectives here, I think the first one is to provide a fundamental understanding of the critical infrastructure interdependence. And the second is to look at risks from an integrated viewpoint and how to compute the risk and how to manage this risk. And also, we want to also understand, also provide a decision support tool so that we can actually give them, hopefully we can give to people from different cities and towns and counties so they can make use of that for their planning purposes. And hopefully this is the research objective towards the end of the project. So the event that motivated us is the subway station location to the floodplains in New York City when it's under the Hurricane Sandy. You can see that while this is the map that tells you has been flooded. They are in New York City downtown area. Where the subway stations flooded, and also other places that New York State or New York City that also has big impact with the airports and also the tunnels and the rail yards and all these places. So the transportation is actually very vulnerable to the natural disasters in Sandy. I like this slide because it also tells you how the moment you have flooding and actually can influence the power system, and the power system is also actually supplying power to the subway stations, and how these interconnections are played out physically. And this is one key component that when the power system is down, the subway stations cannot function because of the loss of the signals, and the powering of the subway is actually plays a significant role in the running of the subway system in New York City. Is when there is a power outage here, so we wish that the recovery process is able to go smoothly, and making sure that the 100% as quickly as possible. But as we have seen in this figure, is that the Sandy storm actually compared with the Irene, the recovery actually is very slow. Looking at this red curve and this blue curve. So the question would be, is like a component that actually we can do so that ahead of time, meaning that we want to do some planning so that we can boost up recovery process over time. So that's why it comes to the interdependency modeling. So so there are many components or many types of interdependencies. One of them is the geographical dependency, and also cyber physical dependencies, and which could be cyber influence, the cyber components, or cyber even physical interactions can also lead to dependencies. And also there are also logical dependencies, which could be human induced, like say human in the loop dependencies, in other words, like people can make mistakes. And also sometimes a supply demand type of dependencies where like say there is a increase of the price somewhere and eventually can decrease the demand in other places. So all these dependencies can actually be pieced together and help us to look at interdependencies. And here is an example, thinking about we have each infrastructure is composed One is the human and cyber and the physical. And here is an example, which is starting with a cyber attack on one of the infrastructures. Like say here, infrastructure one is the power system, for example. So the power system is attacked by the like say there is a Stuxnet type of attack that compromised the cyber layer of the infrastructure one. So what's going to happen is the cyber layer is going to influence the physical layer of the electrical power infrastructure and leads to the loss of the power. But due to that, as we can go to the impact is going to propagate to the infrastructure two, which leads to the failure of the water treatment facilities in the water infrastructure. And then because of the failure of the water treatment facilities and propagates to the human layer of infrastructure too, which leads to contamination of the drinking water, and then leads to the epidemics among human networks, and then leads to a transportation, shortage of fuels for power plants, and then aggregate this entire power system situation because there's a lack of shortage of the fuels to recover the entire power system over time. So you can see that there is a loop if we don't take care of the interdependencies carefully. So the way we want to look at it is try to build a system type of model is how to integrate these all infrastructures. So one way to create this type of model is looking at networks of networks. So we have the thinking about each. Let's say we have two infrastructures. Each layer could be a network model, and we have the intra-network dependencies, which is going to be created by a link, and there's inter-network dependencies. That connects both layers or both infrastructures. And then, what is interesting thing about putting all these network models together versus just looking at a network independently, because when we have the composed network, well, then we can actually see some interesting surprises. There might be links or interdependencies that probably we don't even foresee in the past. For example, there is a loop in the middle here that we probably don't see in the past if we don't compose these two network structure together. And oftentimes when one is make the planning for himself and the infrastructure two is make the planning for him, also for himself, well, if they don't coordinate, well, it's very easy for us to see that the unforeseen interdependencies can actually lead to can play a big role and leads to make the system more vulnerable to faults and attacks. So what we're going to do here is looking at design for resilience. So knowing, let's say, suppose we have these type of models, try to give you an understanding of how the networks are interdependent on each other. So the first thing we want to do is looking at something we call static resilience planning. So basically the issue related to contingencies and investment and how we design network ahead of a time so that we're able to make the network robust and resilient, or creates the least amount of impact when it comes to natural disasters. And an example would be coming back, an example that we have seen earlier is maybe the mitigation plan would be ahead of time. What we can do is we can provide some backup power supply for the water treatment facility so that we can break the linkages in the middle, or we can provide a supply of bottled water in affected areas. Or maybe we can also hire a part-time worker. So if there is epidemics on the human networks and when people cannot go to work and work for the recovery process. So, and also at the same time, we also try to look at the dynamic resilience planning because the system changes over time. And can we actually do the planning in a real time in a sense that while knowing things can, a situation can unexpected or a situation can arise, and how can we actually make strategies so that we can respond to these type of real-time issues. And also we also want to make sure that the planning process also is also risk averse. So in a sense that there might be something can happen. There might be risks that we don't foresee, may happen, may not happen. So how we can take account these type of uncertainties into account, and also design the planning process taking into account these type of risk elements. So the last one also that we aim to look at is the distributed coordinated resilience planning. As we have mentioned, that different infrastructures may look at their planning process on their own. The question is, can we actually able to have sort of the tools allow them to coordinate their planning between network, between infrastructures. So what I'm going to do probably from here on, just a little bit something a little bit technical. It's just just give an audience a snapshot or a quick glance of the model. We're not going to go into the technical details here. One way to look at it is start with a very, very simple model. It's looking at each node, which has a state of being normal or faulty. I mean, if it's normal, then let's say it's 1, and if it's faulty, it's 0. So then each node can take some actions, like say 1 or 0. 1 is to repair or to do some investment. And each node can receive some utility, and also this utility is composed of rewards because it's running or because it's in service. And there's also a cost when it comes to something is down. So the system state and action here is a vector with exponential growth, because when the number of the state is large, well, you can see this number of the state would also be growing. So, and each node is going to determine, okay, how you actually to schedule yourself when to recover. So, and this leads to a dynamic process, which is just try to give you people a taste here. So you can if you are in a normal state, you can take some actions, you can do maintenance, and also when it becomes faulty, when the state goes to 0, you can actually ask yourself how you actually do recovery, what type of actions you can take in order to recover yourself from a faulty state to a normal state. So the transition of that is obviously is the action that you take, and also what is the what type of disaster that you are experiencing, what type of faults you is subjected. And then this entire decision process can be captured by a Markov decision problem, where we aim to maximize the long-term payoff and looking for a stationary process. So the one way to look for these type of solutions is to take into account not only the current cost, but also what would be the consequence if we don't take actions now, and this state will propagate into the future. For example, if we don't take an actions to fix this subway station right now, then perhaps there would be consequences, other consequences in the future that we have to take care of. So in other words, this in order to make a long-term plan, we have to taking into account what is the cost, what is utility that we have currently, and also the future expected utility as well. So, and this entire problem is going to lead into a large-scale linear programming problem, and our aim is how we're going to solve them. And while it's first of all, it's going to be a large linear programming problem because of the number of states that we have. So what we're going to do is to leverage two parts. One is to look at the sparsity, because not all the components are interconnected, so it's not a complete connection type of graph, but and there are sparsities of dependencies among the nodes. So we should leverage these type of sparsity, and also on top of that, we're going to leverage the techniques which called approximate linear programming, so that we can reduce the number of linear programming variables. So by doing that, actually we can actually see that the computation time is actually scalable with respect to the size of network. If we just looking for the exact solution, well, it's actually exponentially increasing. But when it is looking for an approximate solution or leveraging sparsity, then actually we can make the computation time almost invariant in terms of network size. So, and also this is slide just telling you that, well, despite the fact that we are doing some approximation, well, the error actually can be also narrow as well. So we actually the error that we can actually is within the level that we can tolerate. You can see these two lines here are actually very close to each other. So so here what we're going to do later is just going to give you an example. So this is the example that is motivated by, again, the Hurricane Sandy, looking at Lower Manhattan. So where NYU is. So there are multiple power and transit outages. So we specify a certain examples here, like say focus on Lower Manhattan here. There are like say several subway stations and the power system that actually supply to the subway stations. And then we try to do a large scale example and telling, I think, how can I do the, I think I cannot just show you a picture here. So, so here is just a simulation. Unfortunately, I cannot. Let me, maybe I have to exit in a way so that I can show it to people here. Okay, anyway, so there is a, here, this is, maybe we can put online later. So there is a animation that we actually try to create so that this is the process. And I can just see that, okay, there's a cascading failure when there's a large number of interdependent nodes, how they interact with each other. And later on this is just about recovery and how nodes go from zero, everything is failed, to something that is actually fully recovered. So this is a sort of a example or tool that we're actually currently developing to capture large-scale interdependent infrastructure systems. And this one probably is also interesting, is looking at decentralized resilience planning, in a sense that, well, suppose there are two systems and then they plan on their own, and what are the ways so that we can coordinate their planning process so that they could achieve the same type of performance when they plan everything together. So this type of coordinated resilience by communicating or giving people the right information to coordinate both parties is something that is which is showing this figure. By communicating, I think here is 6 steps, and actually can reach the same level of planning as what was done in a centralized way. This is also something that we are working on in order to make sure that two different entities, they actually can commute and coordinate. So the highlights here is try to understand the interdependencies between energy systems and transportation, and to establish a high-level holistic framework so that the system can be actually adapt to a large, complex network, and also large-scale problems, and looking at the value-oriented and distributed maintenance or recovery policy rather than just a myopic policy itself. So what we're going to do from here is the first step is to to integrate some data sources and make the decision data driven. And the second component is looking at how the social and human factors is actually going to be able to enter into the system model and help us to make decisions for the critical infrastructures. And also, we also have the intention to validate and validate our approach with the local utilities. And we have been talking to people from Con Ed and also talking to people from MTA about this type of tools, and to see how to adjust some certain type of parameters, or what type of emphasis they have on in terms of the interdependencies, and also try to obtain useful direction and feedback for transitioning our research for practical uses. And eventually, hopefully, there will be a tool that can allow people to automate the entire process. So, and also there are human factors that actually we could look into. And Ray can maybe talk a little bit about the human factors and how they actually would play a role in our model here.
Hey, first of all, we talk about where do we go from here as if it's the future, but the future is really now, and it may be history. So the human factors that we've been dealing with are at roughly 3 different levels for simplicity's sake. The individual transit users, and then the worker managers, and then finally the next slide has to do with the communities, which link to the jurisdictions and so forth. So the point is that all of these behaviors, and there's quite a big history of these, a large theory that that goes into these, will affect the nodes, the links, their connection properties, their sizes, and also ultimately the kinds of policies that you're going to adopt with respect to which links and nodes do you repair first. So just to give you an idea, I've just drawn from a couple of different sources here. If, for example, looking over to the left, you have a single electric power outage, and that results in a transit outage, which is what we have been focusing on. What can the individual transit user do? What do they do? They can wait for the service to resume, just stand on the platform. They can switch modes, say it's a rail system, switch among different rail systems. We do that a lot outside of New York City. People switch among the PATH system, NJ Transit, and Amtrak. Within New York City, you switch among different lines. And third, the third arrow, you can literally switch modes, go to road systems, which means you get a car, a private vehicle, a ride share, a ride hailing service, or you get on a bike, all using the roads. Fourth, you can really you can just abandon the trip. And people do that for a number of reasons, either that they fear taking the trip, because here there is this outage and they may get stuck in a tunnel. There have been incidences of smoke and the like, so they fear for their safety, or it could just be convenience. They don't want to waste time, and they can forego the trip. Telecommuting is a big field that has arisen as a result of people not wanting to. Now, all of these four arrows don't occur at one time period. They occur. There can be different lengths of time that you could be dealing with. Now, the individual user draws from a very, very large literature by Paul Slovic, Baruch Fishoff, a lot of the people at Decision Research and Carnegie Mellon. It's a field that's several decades old already. And how do people react to events such as an outage? And one of them is personal control. Like the third arrow down, switching modes. They'll jump into a private car because they can control that, but they can't control a train or an airplane or an electric power system. So they tend to prefer opting for things they can control. And there are a whole list of these, about 9 or dozen. How certain are you that the power is going to come back? What have been your previous experiences? If you've been hurt by an electric power outage and a transit outage, you're more likely to avoid the trip. Second, the second group here is the worker behavior and decisions. And workers, I mean managers and the like. Their big problem is being unable to access the disabled power lines and the trains for repair, and the trains getting people out and so forth. It'll take them more time, a lot of money, and the like. And that happens in every single one of these disasters. in Hurricane Irene. For this happened, it wasn't transportation, but the water systems. Transportation was the limiting factor in getting to the water systems to repair them. They just couldn't get there. So what do? So towards the left, the workers can use access alternatives. Remote control is something being considered, airborne access, if you don't run out of helicopters, mutual aid, if you don't run out of people, if you run out of people, you can draw them from a very, very large network that's pre-established in many of these disasters, or in the case of power, draw on alternative power. So if they get all of those in operation, they then can reduce the outage, get transit going, and it kind of goes back and forth. So the next the one thing I did want to point out though is about people's behavior. Information is a big deal. If the subway maps don't accurately portray the distances they have to travel, they may make the wrong decision in choosing what route to take. And a colleague of mine, Zhang Guo, and his colleagues have been writing on this. The second area of human factors is the community level, what their impacts are, and what do they do about it? And these are all very time dependent. The community impacts, if you're talking about multiple, frequent, widespread transit outages, you're going to get multiple impacts that are of economic and social in nature due to the dependency on transit commuting. If you get more of these outages, people's expenditures on alternative transport, time, delay, etc., is a problem. Their jobs can be threatened. They can't get the kids to school. Then you get business interruption and increased business cost. And then what do? Their behavior becomes pressuring the electric power and transit agencies for service improvements, the legal and regulatory actions, government agencies to act, and then finally the demand for government infrastructure investments and actions, and also private sector. So again, these are time dependent and very much integrated. Now, again, going back, all of this will affect the nature of the physical network, how you build it back better and make it more resilient.
So the last point would be, so towards this end, so we want to create a multi-skill type of modeling where the human factors, what Ray has just mentioned, would become a factor to modify these networks and either links or nodes or network structures, so that these type of fine-grained details would also become captured at a high-level network model. So maybe we can just conclude here and then waiting for people's questions to come. So so the concluding remarks are, so what we have to look at as an important thing is the cyber and physical human interconnections among the critical infrastructures, and looking at the systems of systems or network of networks type approach for either pre-event planning, post-event response, and also coordination of the efforts in the recovery process. And also, hopefully, this entire process of decision making will lead to some tools that allowed us to strengthen the security and resilience of critical infrastructures by analyzing and modeling the relationships structure components. Towards the end, I think we have some more technical papers and references maybe for people to look at if they are interested. And maybe we can have some acknowledgements, and then we can anticipate some questions, maybe from Randy, you first. hello.
Yeah.
Randy.
Yeah. Hi. I don't really have any questions. Let's open it up to the
Okay.
audience.
Right.
Have any of the people on the call worked with interdependencies or have personal experience with them that they can bring to the kinds of issues we've raised, methods? No.
No questions? Okay, doesn't look like we have any questions. I'd like to thank everyone for attending. Really appreciate your inputs, Quanyan and Ray. Really appreciate the presentation. Very interesting. Our next CIRI webinar, it will be in October. It'll be Adam Rose from the University of Southern California, who's an economist. We'll be talking about economic analysis of recovery of after disasters. Very interesting, particularly given the most recent news about Hurricane Florence. So be looking for that. If there's no other questions, thanks again, everyone, for attending, and hope to have you on the next webinar as well.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Quanyan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody who has questions, they can always get back to us.
Yeah, they can email us.
Email us and can get back to people later if some question pops up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.